Joining me in the studio to discuss this are Jonathan Isaby. Now, he's Chief Executive at the Taxpayers Alliance. Peter Darley, he's from the Pan-Camden HS2 Alliance. Some of his guys were there just then with Dan. We've got David Leam, Head of Infrastructure at London First, and Sam Tarry. Now, he's a political officer at the Transport Salaried Staff Association. Now, David, tell me, what can this bring to London? Why is HS2 a good thing for London?
I think HS2 is a good thing for both London and the country by strengthening the connections between our main cities and with each other and with London. Will be increasing the opportunities for people to find places to work, to commute, to travel, and also for businesses to locate. We've seen in the past that strengthening our transport links has been good for the economy, whether it's the motorways, the railways. This is the natural next step.
And Jonathan, you agree with that?
Not at all. This is a scheme that has a price tag of at least £50 billion, which is thousands of pounds for every family up and down the country. You saw there outside Parliament the very strong views of some people in Camden and elsewhere in London where this route would literally go through their back gardens, who for obvious reasons are opposed to it. But there are people across the country opposed to it, not least because there are vast parts of the country which will get no benefit from it whatsoever. And it's important to note, actually, it's also there is a cross-party support opposition to this scheme. It's not just Conservative MPs who are against it. There are a number of Labour MPs and indeed some Lib Dems as well, who are not happy with basically signing a blank cheque when we can't afford this big bill for the scheme, when there are other ways in which you could spend that money or not spend it at all, frankly. And
Peter, what's the issue in terms of Camden? What are the concern for Camden residents?
Well, the line is going to do enormous damage to Camden. It's going to destroy residents, properties and businesses, especially around Euston now that the link has been abandoned. We are very concerned, particularly at Euston, that the government and HS2 have not really looked at the options that we have proposed. And they need to do this on a fair basis. We think the whole London end of the line needs to be put through a review. And in the meantime, the line could stop at Old Oak Common, which has better connectivity than Euston.
And what are these options you say you've put to the government?
Well, we've talked about a double-deck station, which would be founded on exactly the property lines of the existing Euston. So it wouldn't take any land, extra land, and it wouldn't harm residents and businesses there. And it could still open opportunities for commercial development.
Do you think that would be, let me ask you, Sam, do you think that would be good enough then?
We'd be happy to do that, absolutely. I mean, for us, it's actually about the project going ahead. I mean, we're in one of the worst economic crises we've had in many years. We're just hopefully starting to turn the table on that. It would be economic illiteracy to say that we're not going to invest money over a long period of time. I mean, £50 billion, even if it is as much as that, is actually stretched over significant, it's not just a lump sum, it's actually stretched, £2 billion per year over significant period. I mean, you're talking 200,000 people back into work off the back of building this scheme, the length of Britain. That, to me, is a huge fiscal stimulus into the economy. And for us as a rail union, we're thinking about not just our current workers, but future workers, but all of the other industries that will actually support the building of that particular line. I think that there's going to clearly have to be negotiations to actually get to a solution that people can agree with, but to not go ahead with it would just be mad. It would be a nod to parochialism and NIMBYism.
Fair point?
No, look, the fact is that the case being put by those in favour of this line has changed at every juncture. At first it was about speed, then it was about connectivity, then it was about capacity. And at every stage those arguments have been knocked down because the West Coast Main Line is the least crowded of all the lines out there at the moment, so capacity is not an issue. And you talk about connectivity. Actually, we should be thinking about connectivity in terms of Wi-Fi rather than physical connectivity. And this is another point that for most of the time that this case has been made, it was assumed that a businessman or businesswoman on a train had zero productivity. But in an age where you've got a Wi-Fi connection, you can work just as hard sat on a train as you could if you were in an office. So the extra time, the slight time saving of getting to Birmingham quicker has a minimal impact.
David, sorry, I can hear you.
People still want to be able to get around and see people face to face. And the fact is, I mean, look at where Google are putting their new office now. It's that they're building a big new office right next to King's Cross Station. Despite the fact of all the advances in technology, actually what they want is to be connected. And actually, you know, it is true that these major infrastructure projects have a big impact. I mean, they have a big impact at Camden and all the way up the route, and it's entirely understandable and legitimate that we see the sorts of, you know, protests and challenge that we see today. But equally, they have a big positive impact as well. Look at King's Cross and that whole area around there, how derelict rail yards and gasworks have been completely transformed. You know, there's a new office box, there's a new cultural hub, new university and academic facilities up there. It's astonishing what's happened up there.
But there's the thing, you talk about Google basing themselves at the end of the line. We were told originally this was going to make loads of jobs up in the north of England, in the Midlands. And actually, if you look at what happened in France and in Spain, when they did high-speed rail, you did see people actually moving more to the centre, to the capital, rather than to the regions. So you're kind of making the opposite point of what other proponents of the cause are saying, and I say at a huge cost to absolutely everybody in the country.
So that's a good thing for London then?
I represent Taxpayers Alliance, which is a national organisation. I don't take a regional point of view.
Yeah, but this is a London programme. We want to talk about what's going to be good for Londoners. So yeah, could this potentially, if you're saying that if we create this rail link, more people are going to be moving to London, more people are going to be connecting well with London, is that not good for us?
Well, but the fact is that the Department of Transport's own numbers show that a number of existing lines will get a worse service if HS2 goes ahead, not least the existing commuter lines into Euston. So people who come into London every day will see a worse service if this goes ahead.